The world holds its breath. Could the staunchest ally become the fiercest foe? Since President Trump's re-election, an era of tension has dawned, turning long-standing alliances upside down. Relations between the United States and Canada have deteriorated sharply following Trump's provocative suggestion that Canada become the 51st state of America. What began as a light-hearted jest has spiraled into a serious diplomatic confrontation, triggering reciprocal tariffs, consumer boycotts, and open animosity that has undermined the once strong ties between neighboring countries. A rift has also emerged between the United States and the European Union, two entities traditionally bound by close allied relationships. From the outset of his new term, Trump has accused the EU of taking advantage of the United States through unfair trade deals and unequal defense agreements. He has argued that Americans bear the burden of European security without adequate contributions from member states, creating a perception of injustice and exploitation. The rhetoric of strength adopted by politicians has led to a noticeable divergence in the approaches of Washington and Brussels to solving global problems. This dissonance is particularly evident in their seemingly allied but increasingly detached policies toward Ukraine. Once united in their support for Kyiv, transatlantic partners are now increasingly divided, undermining the unity that was once the cornerstone of their alliance. Tensions culminated in the imposition of a 20% tariff on imports from the European Union by the United States. The administration presented this move as a corrective measure aimed at eliminating perceived unfair trade barriers. This tariff further complicated relations between the two sides. In response, the European Union is developing broader countermeasures that go beyond traditional tariff wars. Brussels has targeted a sphere where America has limited leverage, namely dominant technology companies. Europe, as a vast market for giants like Google, Apple, Amazon, and Meta, provides the European Union with significant influence. These companies generate billions from European consumers, so regulatory or financial pressure from the EU could seriously affect their global operations. Unlike the American arena where European tech giants have failed to gain a foothold, the European Union is demonstrating strategic acumen by targeting the vulnerabilities of the United States while avoiding the risk of retaliation. Instead of traditional trade retaliation, the EU is moving toward a more precise and risky confrontation with America. In response to this tariff maneuver, French Finance Minister Eric Lombard proposed measures targeting American tech giants through stricter data processing rules. This move allows the EU to exert economic pressure without unleashing a full-blown trade war while preserving channels for negotiation and protecting its own interests. The essence of the strategy lies in restricting the ways in which American tech companies process European data. France proposes using the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, which tightens standards for data collection and processing, impacting corporate behavior on a global scale. The upcoming European Data Act is poised to hold surprises for American tech giants. Imagine Google, Amazon, and Microsoft being forced to share their valuable, closely guarded datasets with European competitors. Or perhaps they will even face restrictions on the cross-border transfer of industrial data. Such requirements will undoubtedly increase compliance costs and force these firms to rethink the very foundations of their data management. But regulatory pressure is not all. France is wasting no time in promoting a digital services tax aimed directly at the so-called Big Five American tech companies Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and Microsoft, known by the acronym GAFAM. Germany and other EU countries may well support this initiative, seeking greater economic reciprocity. This tax could affect a variety of areas: app marketplaces, cloud platforms, and mobile services, precisely those areas where American companies have significant influence in Europe. Such targeted fees are designed to balance transatlantic trade and create a fairer playing field in the European Union's digital economy. In addition to digital levies, the European Union is exploring other methods of targeted impact on the U.S. economy. Instead of imposing comprehensive duties, the possibility of tightening environmental regulations or introducing selective restrictions for individual industries is being considered. This targeted approach will allow Brussels to strike at the sectors where the United States has the greatest advantage, such as technology and services. This will maximize the impact of retaliatory measures while minimizing the negative consequences for European industry. Throughout the discussions, EU representatives have emphasized the need for proportionate and reversible actions aimed at resuming dialogue rather than exacerbating disagreements. As part of this balanced strategy, Brussels could deploy anti-coercion instruments restricting American companies' access to European public procurement or reducing intellectual property privileges within the European Union. These mechanisms demonstrate the EU's commitment to strengthening its regulatory leadership, particularly in the areas of digital and information policy. This approach allows the European Union to defend its interests without resorting to open confrontation and while maintaining space for further negotiations. The influence of technology giants on the European economy cannot be overstated. The revenues generated by companies such as Meta, Google, Apple, and Amazon demonstrate their deep integration into the European market. Consider, for example, Meta Platforms, which owns Facebook and Instagram. In the 2024 fiscal year, the European market brought the company $38.36 billion, representing 23.32% of its total global revenue. This is a significant increase compared to $31.21 billion in 2023, demonstrating an impressive annual growth rate exceeding 20%. Although Europe's share of Meta's total revenue has slightly decreased from 25% in 2017, the region remains the company's second-largest market after North America. These achievements are particularly notable in light of tightening European regulations and impending fines under the Digital Markets Act. A similar picture emerges with Google, whose revenues in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa exceeded $100 billion for the first time in 2024. Search advertising, remaining Google's primary source of revenue, continues to account for more than half of its global advertising sales, with YouTube advertising further strengthening the company's position in the region. This result clearly demonstrates how deeply Google has penetrated the daily lives and commerce of European Union countries. The European market continues to demonstrate its importance to Apple, bringing the company $11.3 billion in revenue in fiscal year 2024, surpassing the $94.2 billion figure for the previous year. This region accounts for approximately 26% of Apple's total sales, confidently holding its position as one of the key markets outside the American continent. Apple's operating profit in Europe reached an impressive $42 billion in 2024, significantly ahead of the $36 billion in 2023. These figures clearly demonstrate the high demand for products and services such as iPhone, MacBook, iCloud, and Apple Music. Amazon, in turn, includes European figures in a broader international segment. However, even in this context, it is clear that in the fourth quarter of 2024, the company's international sales reached $43.4 billion, an increase of 9% compared to the previous year. Despite the lack of separate data for Europe, the overall figures suggest that the region plays an important role in Amazon's global growth. Continuous investment in warehouse infrastructure and the expansion of prime services across the European continent indicate that Amazon's presence in Europe will only strengthen. Collectively, these financial flows underscore Europe's key importance in the business models of American technology giants. The European Union represents not only a vast and profitable market for American companies, but also a legislator of global regulatory standards. As Europe strives to strengthen digital sovereignty and tighten antitrust regulations, technology giants from the U.S. have to adapt to new realities. However, given the significant amount of revenue they generate in European countries, a complete withdrawal from the market seems unlikely. Continuous dialogue between policymakers and corporate executives plays a crucial role in shaping the future relationship between Silicon Valley and Brussels. In a sense, the EU acts for American technology companies simultaneously as a key economic partner and as a strict regulator. The continuous growth in revenues of corporations such as Meta, Google, Apple, and Amazon serves as confirmation that, despite political and regulatory difficulties, the European market remains vital to them. Transatlantic trade demonstrates impressive scale. In 2023, trade between the EU and the US reached €1.66 trillion. Of this volume, €851 billion is attributed to trade in goods and €746 billion to services. These figures vividly demonstrate the results of many years of mutual investment and regulatory harmonization. The economic relationship between the European Union and the United States presents a complex picture of the trade balance. According to the latest data, EU exports of goods to the US reached an impressive €533 billion, accounting for approximately 20.6% of the global export volume. Simultaneously, imports of goods from the US to Europe amounted to €376 billion. Thus, the European side enjoyed a significant surplus of €157 billion. The primary categories of European exports to the US are machinery and transportation equipment, accounting for 39% of shipments. Chemical products constitute 32% and other manufactured goods comprise 20%. However, the situation differs in the realm of services. Here, the United States dominates, selling €427 billion worth of services to the EU, while European exports of services to the US amount to only €319 billion. Consequently, the EU experiences a deficit of €109 billion in services trade. Cross-border investments between the two economic giants reach colossal proportions. Foreign direct investment from both sides totals €5.3 trillion, supporting millions of jobs in both Europe and America. Despite the close economic ties, trade disputes arise between the EU and the US. One such instance was the imposition of a 20% tariff on European products by the Trump administration on April 2, 2025. The US president justified this decision by arguing that the EU creates an effective barrier of 39% for American goods. This statement drew sharp criticism from European officials and economic experts who contested the fairness of such an assessment. The European Commission presents its own estimates of the average tariff on imports from the US, modestly assessing it at approximately 1%. At the same time, according to the WTO, this figure approaches 4.8%. Notably, in 2023, the United States collected an impressive $7 billion in duties on goods arriving from the European Union. This amount is more than double the $3 billion collected by the EU on American imports. The assertion of 39% voiced by Trump emerged as a simplified ratio presented by the EU. In response, the European Union is developing a multi-layered strategy to protect its own interests, striving to avoid escalating tensions. A key element of this strategy is the introduction of targeted tariffs on goods from the US totaling €26 billion. These measures are expected to affect crucial sectors such as steel, agriculture, and machinery. The new tariffs are expected to take effect by mid-April. Brussels is considering targeting sectors of the economy that hold significant weight in Republican states, using economic levers to influence U.S. domestic policy. In addition to tariff measures, the EU is exploring the possibility of applying regulatory and fiscal instruments against large technology companies. In particular, it is considering tightening controls on compliance with the General Data Protection Regulation (GDPR), introducing new restrictions under the EU Data Act, and potentially expanding the practice of levying digital service taxes on giants such as Google, Amazon, and Meta. These companies' European revenues account for 20% to 26% of their global income. The European Union now has a powerful tool at its disposal, the Anti-Coercion Instrument (ACI), capable of protecting European companies from unfair external pressure. This mechanism allows the EU to impose restrictions on firms from countries attempting to use economic influence to gain advantages, such as denying them access to favorable government procurement, financial markets, or intellectual property rights within the bloc. The ACI, adopted in March 2023, aims to address situations where a third country uses economic leverage, discriminatory procurement rules, or subsidies to force EU companies to accept unfavorable terms, threatening exclusion from the market. This new instrument fills a gap left by the previous blocking statute, which mainly concerned extraterritorial sanctions. Now, the ACI gives the EU the ability to respond promptly and proportionately to a wide range of coercive actions. The mechanism is triggered when an EU member state or a company affected by coercion reports the problem. The European Commission conducts an investigation to establish the facts. If coercion is confirmed, the Commission develops a package of countermeasures and submits it to the Council of the EU for approval, which makes a decision by a qualified majority vote. Once finalized, these measures will be implemented through a system of delegated acts, allowing them to take effect within weeks. The available toolkit is impressively diverse, ranging from export restrictions on strategically important goods, covering a wide array of products from advanced semiconductor manufacturing equipment to critical minerals and dual-use technologies, to the suspension of preferential tariff quotas and access to government procurement. Furthermore, there is a provision for the review or forced sale of investments from companies in countries employing economic coercion. For example, if negotiations with the United States on reciprocal access to subsidies under the CHIPS Act or American government procurement rules stall, the ACI could be used to restrict exports of precisely those technologies and materials that are critical to EU interests and excluded from US programs. While this instrument has not yet been activated, its mere existence strengthens the EU's negotiating position. When it is enacted, export restrictions will be closely linked to the initial coercive measures and can be lifted as soon as the parties reach a mutually acceptable agreement. Economic storms are already brewing, foreshadowing difficult times. The European Central Bank estimates that Eurozone economic growth could slow by 0.3 to 0.5% if tariff barriers continue to rise. Frontier economics experts raised the alarm, warning of a potential $29 billion drop in EU goods exports if 20% tariffs are imposed. The consequences for the American economy should not be forgotten. A 25% U.S. tariff on imports from the EU could result in a reduction of American welfare by approximately 1.5% and a significant decrease in trade volumes. Certain sectors of the economy are particularly vulnerable. For instance, approximately 21% of European auto exports go to the U.S., while 15% of American cars are shipped to Europe. At the same time, U.S. pickup trucks are already subject to a 25% EU tariff, significantly higher than the 10% tariff on European cars imported into the U.S. Additionally, tighter data regulations could lead to a sharp increase in compliance costs for American technology companies, inevitably impacting their profits and investment activity in Europe. However, beyond these economic troubles lies something more profound, as this dispute has serious geopolitical implications that could reshape the global balance of power. Turbulence is shaking stock markets in Europe and America, causing investors to anxiously monitor the prospect of stagflation triggered by trade wars. Some experts fear that American tariffs could paradoxically benefit Chinese exporters by redirecting trade flows and intensifying competition for European manufacturers. In these circumstances, Europe faces the daunting task of maintaining both economic ties and strategic independence in its relations with Washington and Beijing. Brussels states its desire for a balanced agreement that takes mutual interests into account while warning against sliding into a full-scale economic war. European officials emphasize their readiness for countermeasures if negotiations stall. Some forecasts suggest that the escalation of trade wars and the imposition of retaliatory tariffs could result in global losses of up to $1.4 trillion. Amid rising geopolitical tensions and the pursuit of technological sovereignty, the European Union is taking decisive steps to reduce its dependence on American technologies. A key element of this strategy is the Invest AI program presented at the AI Action 2025 summit in Paris. The program aims to mobilize €200 billion to strengthen Europe's position in the field of artificial intelligence. The European Union is betting on artificial intelligence, directing significant funds into research, infrastructure, and training. A special place in these plans is given to the construction of 4 giant AI factories, for which €20 billion has been allocated. These factories are intended to become centers for training advanced AI models equipped with the most modern computing power. The initiative has received strong support from both the public and private sectors. More than 60 European companies have joined forces, pledging to invest €150 billion in AI-related projects. France, in turn, announced an additional investment plan of €109 billion aimed at modernizing infrastructure and expanding capabilities in the field of AI. National strategies also play an important role in the overall European plan. For example, Turin is creating the Italian Institute for Artificial Intelligence for Industry AI4I. This institute will focus on integrating AI into various sectors of the economy and will be a key recipient of Invest AI funds. However, despite such large-scale investments, the European Union faces difficulties in competing with the pace of AI development in the United States and China. Critics point out that private investment in AI in Europe has historically been lower and emphasize the need for more coordinated action to stimulate innovation and commercialization of AI technologies. Nevertheless, the European Union's comprehensive approach, combining significant funding, a regulatory framework, and international cooperation, demonstrates a firm intention to take a worthy place on the global artificial intelligence stage. A tangible tension has emerged in relations between the European Union and the United States, one manifestation of which has been the consumer boycott of Tesla products in Europe. The company has faced serious challenges in the European market where falling sales have coincided with a growing wave of public discontent. This is due to the political statements and actions of Tesla CEO Elon Musk, which have provoked strong rejection among many Europeans. His open support for far-right political forces, in particular the German party Alternative for Germany, has been seen as a challenge to the values shared by the majority of people on the European continent. Particular outrage was caused by Musk's statements, which were seen as showing a contemptuous attitude towards the historical memory of Germany's Nazi past. The businessman's appearance at an event organized by Alternative for Germany only added fuel to the fire. In addition, the gesture that Musk allowed himself at President Trump's inauguration was interpreted by many as a Nazi salute, which also contributed to the growth of negative attitudes towards him and his company in European society. These controversial episodes have had a swift impact on Tesla's economic performance. Sales of electric vehicles have fallen sharply across Europe. In Germany, the world's second-largest market for Tesla, sales fell by an impressive 76% in February 2025 compared to the same period last year. In France, the decline reached 63.4%, in Spain, 75.4%, in Sweden, 46%, and in the Netherlands, 42.5%. Against the backdrop of the overall rise of the European electric vehicle market, the fall in Tesla's sales looks particularly stark, indicating a crisis of confidence in the company and its management rather than influence of macroeconomic factors. Consumer dissatisfaction has escalated into acts of vandalism at Tesla showrooms in Berlin and Stockholm. Some owners, disappointed, are expressing public regret, placing stickers on their cars with confessions of their mistake. The corporate world is also showing alienation. The German pharmacy chain Rossmann and the green energy supplier Lichtblick have excluded Tesla from their fleets, citing the incompatibility of Elon Musk's image with their corporate principles. These events undermine Tesla's financial position in the global electric vehicle market. The company's share in Europe is shrinking, while Chinese manufacturer BYD is strengthening its position, recently overtaking Tesla in terms of revenue, indicating a major shift in the industry. Analysts warn that Tesla's European problems could be a harbinger of a larger crisis if public opinion continues to deteriorate due to political disagreements associated with Musk's name. Once an innovative and forward-thinking brand, it is now experiencing a reputational crisis, calling into question its continued existence in a market where environmental awareness and political activism among consumers are particularly high. What awaits it ahead? The Trump administration's tariff policy, directed against long-standing allies, is fraught with serious risks and far-reaching consequences. In economic terms, rising consumer spending, inflationary pressures, and disrupted trade ties could slow economic growth and create stress for households on both sides of the Atlantic. In the political and strategic context, these measures could lead to a restructuring of global alliances. Institutions such as NATO are reportedly considering structural changes to cope with deepening divisions. The undermining of mutual trust increases the risk of geopolitical conflicts as cooperation in defense and foreign policy weakens. Ironically, Trump's actions may push U.S. allies to strengthen their economic independence. Canada and the European Union are developing strategies to reduce their dependence on American markets and supply chains. These steps could support their industrial potential and competitiveness in the long term. Canada is demonstrating a strategic commitment to strengthening economic ties beyond its traditional southern neighbor. Ottawa is actively developing trade relations with the European Union as evidenced by an impressive 65% growth in bilateral trade since 2017. The Raw Materials Partnership concluded in 2021 serves as another important step in diversifying export flows and reducing dependence on the United States. At the same time, Canada is taking steps to bring manufacturing capacity back home. Investments in advanced manufacturing technologies such as robotics and artificial intelligence are designed to breathe new life into key sectors of the economy, from clean energy to healthcare. These efforts are aimed at strengthening the country's economic sovereignty. Canada also prioritizes the resilience of supply chains. Collaboration with domestic industries and infrastructure modernization allow the economy to be protected from potential global shocks and political pressure. The European Union, in turn, seeks to ensure a stable supply of critical raw materials. Partnerships with resource-rich countries like Canada play a key role here. In parallel, the EU is implementing a policy of reindustrialization, prioritizing long-term industrial investments rather than short-term gains. In an era of increasing geopolitical tension and fragile global supply chains, when Western alliances are experiencing a period of turbulence and many countries are cautiously exploring opportunities to strengthen ties in the East. Particularly with China, we are witnessing a complex picture of rethinking strategic priorities. The consequences of the tariff wars initiated by the Trump administration continue to influence the global economy and politics. It remains to be seen whether this will lead to a realignment of alliances, a resurgence of national production, or a prolonged period of instability. The coming years will be decisive in shaping a new international order where the stakes are higher than ever. When content sparks interest and inspires, the best way to express appreciation to the authors is through simple but meaningful support, a like and a subscription. This is not just a formality, but a real contribution to the development of the community and an incentive to create new and interesting materials. By subscribing, viewers can stay up to date on all updates and not miss fresh releases. As a token of appreciation for your interest, we invite you to explore other videos available on the channel, specially selected to broaden your horizons.